My first summer as a counselor at Camp Willowbrook was supposed to be all s'mores and sunshine. I was 19, desperate for cash, and convinced I'd spend 8 weeks herding giggling kids through canoe races and bug spray routines. The camp was old, the kind of place where the pine trees groaned in the wind and the wooden cabins smelled like wet socks and decades of sunscreen. My cabin, Whispering Pines, was the farthest from the mess hall, tucked behind a curtain of ferns so thick it felt like the woods were swallowing it whole. The first night, I laughed at the kids' ghost stories about the Shadow Walker, some local legend about a thing that copied voices. But by the third night, I stopped laughing, because that's when the footsteps started. It was always 3:24 a.m., not 3:25, not 3:23, 3:24 like some sick alarm clock. I'd jerk awake, heart slamming, to the sound of something circling the cabin. Not the heavy tread of a kid sneaking out, but light, almost delicate steps, like someone walking on tiptoe through wet grass. The first few times I chalked it up to raccoons. Then one morning, I woke up to 5 tiny footprints in dried mud on the floorboards, right beside my bed. They were too small for a teenager, too perfect, like a child's bare feet. But the door was still deadbolted. The windows were latched from the inside, and when I checked the security log, no campers had left their cabins after lights out. That's when I noticed the second set of prints, leading back toward the door, but stopping halfway, as if whatever made them had just vanished. I tried reporting it to the head counselor, Greg, a sunburnt ex-Marine who smelled like coffee and cynicism. He smirked, said it was probably some punk camper with a lockpick, and reminded me not to spook the kids with ghost crap. But the next night I barricaded my door anyway, a chair wedged under the knob, my hiking boots propped against the frame. I even duct taped the windows shut, my hand shaking so bad the roll kept slipping. When I finally passed out from exhaustion, the footsteps came again. This time they paused by my window. Then, knocking. 3 soft, deliberate raps, like a kid playing ding-dong ditch. I froze, my throat squeezing shut, because outside that window, there wasn't a porch, just a 7-foot drop into thorny blackberry bushes. Nothing human could have reached it. By week 2, I'd stopped sleeping. I'd sit awake with my flashlight and a stolen kitchen knife, staring at the door, until sunrise. The footprints kept appearing though, always in the same spot, always facing my bed. One morning I found a handful of pine needles on my pillow, damp and reeking of river water. That's when I dug into Camp Willowbrook's accidents. The archives were moldy and handwritten, but I found it. In 1987, a camper named Eli Whitaker vanished during a storm. They'd searched for weeks, but all they ever found was one sneaker, caked in mud near the old well. The file included a photo of Eli, a gap-toothed kid with a bowl cut, and my stomach dropped. The footprints in my cabin, they matched the size 4 soles in the crime scene photo. The storm hit on the 9th night. Rain drummed on the roof like fists, and the power went out, plunging the camp into a wet, howling blackness. I just flicked on my flashlight when I heard it, a child's voice, muffled by the wind. "Help me." My blood turned to ice. It came from outside the door, high-pitched and trembling, exactly how a scared kid would sound. Logic screamed it was a trick, but what if some camper was out there lost in the storm? I tore the barricade down and yanked the door open. The beam of my flashlight cut through the rain and lit up nothing, just swaying trees and a puddle of murky water by the steps. Then, from inside the cabin behind me, Eli's voice whispered, "You left the door open." I spun around so fast I slipped in the mud tracked across the floor. The flashlight rolled, casting jagged shadows, and for half a heartbeat I saw him. A small, hunched figure crouched beside my bed, his back to me. His clothes were dripping, his hair stringy with algae, like he'd just crawled out of the river. Then the light flickered, and he was gone. The only proof he'd been there was the stench of rotting leaves and the handprint on my sheets. A perfect wet outline of a child's fingers, right where my ribs would have been if I'd been lying down. That's when I realized he wasn't lost. He was hunting. Every night he'd gotten closer, and now he didn't need the door anymore. The storm screamed like a living thing as I sprinted toward the mess hall, my bare feet slicing on pine cones. Every shadow between the trees seemed to twitch as I passed. Inside, Greg sat peeling the label off his bourbon bottle, his face slack with a familiarity that made my stomach drop. "Let me guess," he hiccuped. 3:24 a.m., tiny footprints, voice at the window. The way he said it, like reading a grocery list, chilled me. "More than the rain. It's always whispering pines," he muttered. "We move the cabin every decade, but he finds it." Then the roof creaked. Something heavy dragged itself across the shingles above us, clicking like broken fingernails on wood. Greg's hand shook as he slid a double-barreled shotgun across the table. "Rock salt. Won't kill it, but it'll piss it off enough to leave. For a while." The cabin door was open when I returned, though I'd locked it. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of a freshly dug grave. My flashlight died the second I crossed the threshold. That's when the breathing started. Not from one corner, but from everywhere, like the walls themselves were panting. I fired blindly. The muzzle flash froze the room in a snapshot. Eli crouched in the rafters, his jaw unhinged like a snake's, dripping black sludge onto my pillow. Then the gun jammed. The thing dropped onto my back, its weight all wrong, too light, too hollow, and whispered with my own voice, "You shouldn't have run." Its fingers, brittle as dried twigs, pressed into my wrists. When I woke at dawn, the gun was clean, reloaded, and laid neatly on my chest. Outside, a single line of child-sized footprints led into the woods. But this time, adult-sized prints followed. The campers don't stare at me anymore. They flinch. I've started finding strange things in my cabin. A braid of black hair tied to my bedpost, teeth marks in my soap, my own voice humming lullabies from the woods at night. Greg avoids me now, but last week I caught him burning a pile of size 4 sneakers behind the equipment shed. The flames smelled like wet leather and something sweet, like rotten fruit. I should leave. But the weirdest part? I don't want to. When I wake at 3:24 a.m. now, my mouth tastes like river water, and my hands are crusted with dirt I don't remember touching. Sometimes in the mirror, my reflection smiles before I do. The campers whisper that the shadow walker steals your face, but they're wrong. It doesn't take. It shares. And down by the old well where the mud never dries, there are 2 sets of footprints now, one small, one mine. They walk side by side. My name's Jake, and last summer I learned why some deals are too good to be true. I was 21, broke as hell, and scrambling to find a place near campus after my roommate bailed. That's how I ended up in that creaky Victorian house on Mulberry Street. Landlord said $300 a month, utilities included, and all I had to do was ignore the basement. "Storage issues," he'd said, tapping the padlock like it was no big deal. The guy was in his 60s, wore this faded baseball cap with 1987 stitched on it, and smelled like mothballs. Normal enough, right? For the first week I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Then the noises started. It wasn't just the usual house settling. Around 2 a.m., I'd wake up to this thud, 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 like someone pacing barefoot directly under my bed. Then came the whispers, not muffled but deliberate, like they were meant to crawl up through the floor vents. One night I caught actual words. "Cold in here." I froze. My room was sweltering. I'd been sleeping in boxers. When I texted, "The landlord," he replied with this weirdly calm, "Old pipes, kid, don't worry about it." But the laughter. Jesus. It wasn't my sleep-deprived brain. It was giddy, almost childish, and it stopped the second I sat up in bed. That's when I knew. Whatever was down there wasn't just stored. It was waiting. By the 4th night, I was too wired to sleep. I'd started sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow like some paranoid horror movie protagonist, jumping at every creak. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. Again, the footsteps. But this time they weren't random. They moved in a slow, deliberate circle, stopping right beneath where my head rested. Then, a long, shuddering inhale, like someone was smelling the air through the vent. My skin prickled. I didn't breathe. That's when the voice came again, clearer than ever. "Jake." My name. Not a question. A greeting. I bolted upright, heart hammering. No way that was pipes. The next morning I called the landlord, my voice shaking. He sighed like I was wasting his time. "Look, kid, if you're that freaked out, just check the damn basement yourself." Like he was daring me. That's when I noticed the padlock wasn't just old. It was new. Shiny brass against the rusted door. I waited until noon, when the sunlight poured through the windows like it could burn away the dread. Grabbed a crowbar from the garage, hands sweating. The lock snapped easier than I expected, like it had been opened recently. The door swung inward with a groan, and the smell hit me first. Stale sweat, sour milk, and something metallic. Blood. My stomach lurched. The stairs groaned under my weight like they hadn't been touched in years, but the dust on the handrail was smudged. Fingerprints. Fresh ones. My phone flashlight flickered as I stepped onto the concrete floor, and that's when I saw it. A nest. A fucking nest. A stained mattress with a dent in the center, like someone had been sitting there for hours. Empty chip bags, energy drink cans, and Jesus. A laptop. Lid. Half open, screen dark. But the worst part? The chair. An old wooden dining chair, positioned directly under the floor vent that led to my room. The seat was worn shiny, like someone had spent nights perched there listening. My throat tightened. This wasn't storage. This was a routine. Then I spotted the papers, stacks of them neatly piled beside the chair. My hands shook as I grabbed the top sheet. July 14th. Jake came home at 11:37 p.m., showered for 12 minutes, played music, sounded like the Strokes. Talked on phone to mom. Said rent was fine. Every fucking detail. Dates, times, things I'd said alone in my room. The next page had sketches. My bed, my desk, my window. At the bottom, in jagged letters, he still doesn't know. The air left my lungs. I whipped around, flashlight slicing through the dark. That's when I heard it. A soft click from upstairs. The basement door. Slowly, gently, swinging shut. The door clicked shut like a trap. I lunged for the stairs, my pulse roaring in. My ears. But the handle wouldn't turn. Locked from the outside. No. No, no, no. I threw my shoulder against the door, the wood rattling but holding firm. That's when the laughter started again. Muffled but closer now, like it was right on the other side. A man's voice humming tunelessly. The landlord's voice. My stomach dropped. "Kid," he called, almost cheerful. Shoulda listened. The humming resumed, followed by footsteps moving away. I screamed for help, but the sound choked in my throat. The basement air felt thicker suddenly, like the walls were breathing in. I turned back to the laptop, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. When I pried it open, the screen lit up. No password. The desktop was a single folder. Jake. Inside, photos. Hundreds of them. Me walking to my car. Me through my bedroom window, shirtless, half asleep. A close-up of my face, taken through the vent while I slept. My vision blurred. Then I saw the most recent file, time-stamped last night. A video. I hit play. There I was, tossing in bed while a shadow crouched just beyond the frame. The camera tilted up. The landlord's grinning face filled the screen. A finger pressed to his lips. "Shh," he whispered. The video ended. The laptop screen went black, but his grin was burned into my brain. I couldn't stay down there. I'd rather break my shoulder slamming through that door than spend another second with those photos, those notes, that fucking chair. I grabbed the crowbar and wedged it into the door frame, heaving until the wood splintered. The second I burst into the hallway, I knew something was wrong. The house was silent. Too silent. No humming, no footsteps. Just the fridge humming in the kitchen like everything was normal. Then I saw it. The front door was wide open, sunlight pouring in. A trap? A way out? I didn't care. I ran. I didn't stop until I hit the sidewalk, gasping, my keys still inside. I called 911 from a neighbor's porch, babbling about the basement, the laptop, the video. The cops came fast, but by the time they kicked in the landlord's door, he was gone. No laptop, no notes, just the chair, still under the vent. They found his car abandoned at a Greyhound station 2 towns over. The worst part? The lead detective pulled me aside, voice low. "That house was never legally rented to you," he said. "The real owner died 3 years ago. The guy in the hat? No record of him. Just the padlock, the chair, and a single sheet of paper left on my bed. You were my favorite." My name's Jake, and up until last summer I'd have called myself the least paranoid guy alive. I'm 28, work in IT, and my idea of adventure is trying a new craft beer. So when my girlfriend Lisa suggested a weekend getaway upstate with our friends Mark and Dana, I was all in. We rented this rustic Airbnb cabin near Pine Grove, surrounded by nothing but trees and silence. Picture the perfect disconnect. No cell service, a deck with a grill, and a hot tub under the stars. The first afternoon, I brought out my DJI drone thinking I'd get some scenic shots of the woods. I wandered maybe 10 minutes behind the cabin, pushing through thick brush until I stumbled on this weird, overgrown fire pit. Rusted cans, half buried in dirt like they'd been there for years. The vibe was off. Not haunted, just deliberate. Like whoever left them didn't expect visitors. That night, after too many beers and burgers, we hooked my drone footage up to the TV, laughing at shaky close-ups of trees. Then the room went dead silent. In one shot, way off in the distance behind me, something moved. Not an animal. Something tall, standing perfectly still between two pines. The figure was blurry, but human-shaped, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie or coat. No face, just stillness. The timestamp showed it had been there for 53 seconds while I obliviously panned the drone around the fire pit. Lisa grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "You didn't see anyone out there?" she whispered. I hadn't. Not a sound, not a snapped twig. We rewound it 5 times, arguing over shadows, until Dana pointed out the worst part. The figure wasn't just watching. In the last frames, its head tilted, slowly, almost mechanically, like it was tracking the drone. We didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the cabin floorboards had us jerking upright, imagining that thing outside the windows. By dawn, we'd convinced ourselves it was just some hiker, weird but harmless. Still, something nagged at me. I grabbed a kitchen knife like an idiot, as if that'd help, and trudged back to the fire pit alone. The second I saw it, my stomach dropped. The ashes were fresh, not warm, but definitely recent, with that sour charcoal smell. The cans I'd kicked aside yesterday, stacked in a neat pyramid against a rock. Worst of all, footprints, not boots, but something barefoot or maybe socked, led from the pit toward our cabin, then veered sharply into thicker woods. My hands shook so bad I could barely film it with my phone. Back at the cabin, Mark refused to believe me until I showed him the photos. "Dude, we'd have heard someone this close," he kept saying, but his voice cracked. Dana, the pragmatic one, called the Airbnb host, who swore no one had rented the place in weeks. Lisa, pale as milk, whispered, "What if they're still here?" That's when we noticed it. The back door's deadbolt, which we always locked, was undone. Not broken, just unlocked. We tore the place apart, closets, underbeds, even the damp crawl space, but found nothing. No intruder, no signs of forced entry. Just that door, swinging open in the breeze like an invitation. The woods outside, dead silent. No birds, no wind. Just us, holding our breath, waiting for something to move in the trees. We spent the rest of the morning arguing. Half of us wanted to pack up and leave. The other half, mostly Mark, insisted we were overreacting. "It's probably just some homeless guy camping out here," he said, like that made it better. By noon, we'd compromised. We'd check the woods one last time, together, and if we didn't find anything, we'd stay. Stupid, I know. The second we stepped off the deck, the air changed. Thick and heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear. About 20 feet into the trees, Lisa froze. "Do you smell that?" she whispered. It was sweet, almost chemical, like rotting fruit and gasoline. Mark joked about axe murderer perfume, but nobody laughed. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, something crunched, a slow, deliberate step, like whatever it was wanted us to hear it. We bolted back to the cabin, slamming the door behind us. Dana immediately started Googling local crime reports, useless with the spotty Wi-Fi, while Mark, ever the skeptic, grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat. "I'm checking the perimeter," he announced. Lisa begged him not to go alone, but he shrugged her off. "Relax, it's broad daylight." The second he disappeared around the side of the cabin, we heard it. A low, guttural click, like a tongue against teeth coming from inside the walls. Lisa screamed. Dana dropped her phone. And then, like some sick punchline, Mark's voice rang out from the backyard. "Guys, you gotta see this." His tone was all wrong. Too calm, too flat, like something was pretending to be Mark. The three of us exchanged a look. Do we open the door? Do we run? Before we could decide, the knocking started. Not on the door, but on the windows. One after another, a slow, methodical tap, 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 like someone testing the glass for weakness. Lisa was hyperventilating and Dana had tears streaming down her face, but I forced myself to peek through the curtains. The backyard was empty. No mark, no figure, just the trees swaying slightly like they were laughing at us. Then, from right beneath the window, a whisper, "Jake." It wasn't Mark's voice. It wasn't human. It was wet and garbled, like words spoken through a mouthful of mud. I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table, and that's when the power went out. We spent the next 2 hours barricaded in the master bedroom listening to the thing circle the house. It never shouted, never pounded, just tapped, like it had all the time in the world. At some point, Dana's phone buzzed, a text from Mark. "Where are you guys?" We didn't answer. Another buzz. "Stop messing around." Then a third. "I'm coming in." The doorknob rattled. Lisa muffled a sob into my shoulder. And then, silence. No more texts, no more tapping, just the distant sound of a car engine. We waited another hour before daring to move. The cabin was trashed, furniture overturned, food smeared on the walls, but no sign of Mark, or the thing. The only clue? A single muddy footprint on the kitchen counter facing the window, like someone had stood there watching the road, waiting for us to leave. We didn't call the cops. What would we even say? Hey, our friend might be a skinwalker now? We packed in record time, throwing our stuff into the car like the cabin itself was cursed. As we peeled out of the driveway, Lisa gasped. There at the tree line stood Mark, or something wearing his face. His smile was too wide, his eyes too dark. He raised a hand, not waving, just holding it up, like he was pressing against an invisible wall. Dana floored it. None of us spoke the whole drive home. Back in the city, we reported Mark missing. The cops found his phone at the cabin, along with his wallet and keys. No signs of a struggle, no evidence of anyone else. Just his prints everywhere, like he'd touched every surface. The case went cold fast. Lisa and I broke up a month later. Couldn't look at each other without seeing that thing in the woods. Dana moved out of state. And Mark? Well, 2 weeks ago I got a friend request from an account with his name. No posts, no photos, just a blank profile. I didn't accept. But that night I woke up to my phone buzzing. A message from the account. "You left me behind." I blocked it, changed my number. But sometimes late at night I hear tapping on my apartment window. Just once. Like a reminder. I still don't know what that thing was. A person? A hallucination? Something worse? All I know is it watched us long before we saw it. Maybe it's been watching me my whole life. Maybe it's watching you right now. Ever feel like you're being stared at through a window? A shadow in the trees? Don't ignore it. And if you hear tapping, run. As for the cabin, I looked it up last year. It's still listed on Airbnb. 5-star reviews. So peaceful, they say. Perfect for disconnecting. The photos all show the same deck, the same hot tub, the same trees. But if you zoom in, way in the background of one shot, there's a figure, standing perfectly still, watching.